What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Burndown YouTube channel and the 1974 GMC Jimmy build I have sitting behind me. So we're in the process of still continuing to get started. I'll bring you guys along step by step for an entire build. So it'll be a long build, a long process, and a lot of time and effort and sweat, blood and tears going into this thing to get it where we'd like to get it. So that brings me to a bit of a ramble. For those of you guys that are new to building cars, maybe you have a project, you want to start one like this, and you're like, I want to take it all apart and get it all done. Well, some words of wisdom and advice to you are, it is a long road. It's not done overnight. Make sure you have the space, make sure you have the time, effort, and money to put into the project. And also, it helps to break it down into smaller increments, because as a whole, it is very overwhelming to build an entire vehicle. There's a lot involved, and it takes a lot of time, effort, and like I said, money for the most part. So if you don't have a plan, it's like the equivalent of loading your family in the car, gassing it up, getting all the snacks and going on a road trip, but you don't have a map, you don't know where you're going, and eventually you're just going to run out of snacks, and then you're going to run out of gas, and everybody's going to be upset, and you're probably going to not have a fun trip. So what we are working on today is we're going to move over to the big chunky dirt and dust that's underneath. Just a quick recap: we moved the front sheet metal, drivetrain, transfer case, and then we cleaned the inside and cleaned all the glass and all the stuff out of there, and we inspected the inside. So we're going to start with the chassis, and I want to clean the big chunky stuff off now, right? I'm not trying to spick and span the thing, bring it to bare metal. But all this loose stuff, you just get in here with your scraper and just knock the big stuff off. And it looks like we have quite a bit all the way back. So we definitely have our fun cut out for us. The reason I'm going to do this is because, again, we're starting on the chassis. We got to pull axles, rebuild the lines, pull all that out, clean this thing, paint it, put all new lines and everything back in. But if you're wondering why you just don't take it apart and then clean it, I want to knock the big chunky stuff and all the things off, like, because this is so terrible right now. And mainly because this is going to live on jack stands. So while the axles are still underneath it, before we get too froggy and pull those out, and this big beautiful beast becomes an ornament in my garage and it's hard to move around, I want to knock all the big stuff out. We're going to make a giant mess, and then we can push the thing out, clean up really well, and then situate it exactly where we want it before it lives on stands for the next how many months, who knows. So let's get to cleaning, and then we'll look at pulling probably the rear axle first, and then I think we'll move on to the front. We need to identify those and order parts, and then we have lines and everything else to work on. But step one, make a mess. So this is a pile of dirt that we've gotten so far just out of here, and that's all stuff that was fairly loose. Some of it I have to chip away at, but I just don't want it falling under my face when we're working on this thing. It all needs to get clean regardless. And for those of you that are wondering, I don't have a bazillion pound pressure washer. It's just a standard light duty type little guy. So we're gonna chip the big stuff, the stuff that's kind of crusty, chip it down pretty good before we get in there with the pressure washer and blow it all back in our faces, because that's what always seems to happen. But first, see if we can take the cross member out. The top upper bolts are against the floor pan, so I gotta wedge a wrench in there, but I think I can get it out. That'll be easier to load a drivetrain in and out, and then obviously lines. I don't have to snake lines through that. We can just set it on the side of the frame, because eventually we're going to just copy these lines and then put them all back in. Copy for the most part. I don't know if this is my favorite, but I guess that's how factory did it, right? So let's see if we can yank that cross member, and then we'll keep on cleaning the crust. Cross member is out. And then the floor isn't terribly close here, but on that side, I had to wedge the old wrench in there. So those bolts will stay in there. We'll clean them up, and then obviously reuse them. And it gets that out of the way. And like I said, for the lines and everything to go through, now I don't have to worry about snaking them through the opening here. They can just go straight. So all these lines that go back, you're gonna have to deal with those at some point. So we will continue our cleanup quest. I can do this one outside the vehicle, which is nice. Makes life a lot easier. I can stand up and do it. I don't have to land here like a caveman. But we'll knock more of this stuff off, and then we'll push it out at a certain point, fire up the old pressure washer. With the transmission mount out, We ran across this guy, which is the mount for the transfer case, right? This holds the load on the side. We'll need to put new rubber and things in this, but I want to take this out so I have access a little bit better to what we're trying to do here. But I'm going to clean this and then actually put it back in even loosely until we rebuild it, but mainly as a placeholder so I don't forget. So when I make lines, I don't get froggy and think, oh, I can just put it here. I mean, we're going to try to emulate these stock lines and probably use these factory clamps, or maybe something a little nicer if they sell these again, or we'll figure that portion out when we get there. But I'd like to just retain it similar to how it is. So I want to make sure this is in place so we account for it. But I'd like to move it so we can still clean. So wire wheel these guys a little bit, and then we'll put some effort in so we can take this out, and then we'll clean that with the cross member. And then again, I'll set this, I think, back in place after we pressure wash and kind of wash things down and get it a little more presentable. But yeah, we're getting to the end of the road over here. We're starting to look decent. Like, I'm not even gonna mess with this. We'll mess with all this stuff when it's time to actually clean up before we coat and do things like that. But I just want to knock a lot of this off. I mean, you can see we got the Sahara Desert going down over there, so it just disrupts my ADD. And then we'll clean up there a little bit better. Like I said, we'll pressure wash, and life will be good. I got the right wrench. We got this thing loosened up, but before I take it all the way off, I kind of took it off and I was like, oh, wait a minute. I put it back together, and here's another tip. This doesn't look that complicated, right? But later on, it's gonna be a long time before we go to reassemble this, all these cables and such. So I like to take a picture of what it looked like when it was installed. That way, if I have questions, am I smart enough to figure it out? Yeah, but sometimes you go brain dead because you're tired and you're like, man, I don't remember how this goes. Just take a picture with your phone, save it, create a file on your computer. You can reference it when you're doing assembly, and if you're looking at it and you're kind of messing with it, you go back through, bada boom, bada bing, oh, it goes like that. Bob's your uncle. And you get her done. So we did that, and then the other thing too is I'll keep all the hardware together on this monstrosity of a mount. So that way I know where it goes and all that fun stuff, and just keeps better track of things. Again, you throw all this stuff in a bucket, you separate this thing, you're going to be trying to figure out how it actually went and scouring Google for pictures. When you had it the whole time, you just got to take a picture. Carry on. All right. Hanging out, zipping parts down. I disassembled the cross member. Essentially it'll look like this, maybe a little bit worse. You can see the mess. We got water out there, so I'm letting that dry up so we can sweep it up, and then we'll push the truck in a little bit. But we'll zip this down, and then I'll put the hardware, put it right back in place. And another thing too with cleaning these parts is you get to really inspect and see what kind of shape they're in. This isn't a 100% thorough job. This is knocking all the big stuff off. I just have a light duty little wheel here. Nothing too crazy. It's coming off fairly quickly. And this might be a good powder coat part later on. It's big and thick. They can't really warp it out cooking it. They can make it black. I might be able to send a batch of parts, depending on what we do, off to powder coat at some point. While I'm working on the stuff like a frame, you know, I can't send the frame to powder coat. I guess technically you could, but we're not going that crazy with it. But maybe some of the smaller, bulky items like this, we could send them off while we're doing other things. And then, you know, by the time we get them back, maybe we'll be able to bolt them on. We'll have to see. That all goes with budget and time frame and what you're really working on. So I'm gonna get back to it. Cleaning this guy, we're gonna call it here for today. Yeah, welcome to Cleaning 101. And let me know how you guys do it. I mean, I was thinking you could put degreaser and you could do a bunch of other stuff, but again, we're gonna have to really revisit the frame with a real wire wheel and really get after it before we actually put any sort of coating on there. This is just to knock off the big old chunky turds. And just so you guys know, when I pressure washed and it shot right back in my face, and I was gonna film it, but I had junk in my eye and I was like, I called that one. So don't jinx yourself either. And I guess if you're gonna pressure wash, maybe wear some goggles or something. That's probably a good idea. Till next time, I'm out.